All right, well, welcome everybody to our IDRPP Autism ECHO. If you will just put your name and contact information into the chat, we'll get started with today's session. I'm glad that you're joining. As you notice, we are recording today's session. We use that for quality and educational improvement. You are always able to go back and access these recordings, share those with colleagues that you think might find this interesting, and we store those on our Canvas and YouTube channels. I want to give a huge shout out to the Autism Council of Utah and the Autism Awareness License Plate for providing funding for this project. It's been a great project and we've really enjoyed partnering with them. If you've never joined an ECHO session, welcome to your first ECHO session. You're going to be pleasantly surprised with today's topic. But we will always have opportunities for professional networking, and that's why we ask you to put your name and contact information into the chat. When we go into breakout groups, you can then know other people that are on the call and where we're all from. You know, if we were in person, we'd be chit-chatting and gathering everybody's information. So that's what we're hoping to do just virtually. We will always have a subject matter expert or a didactic speaker. I'm thrilled today to have Dr. Tom Higbee from the ASSERT program joining us. And then we also have a case presentation where we have, we'll then go into small breakout groups and discuss that case, because we have amazing people on this call with tons of knowledge and experience, and it's a great way to share and join that with each other. And then my screen wasn't forwarding, so again, just that we want this to be interactive. So if you will put your questions, your comments, or anything into chat, one of our hub members, Colin Kingsbury, monitors that for us. So he will be sure to ask your questions. Tom, he does just raise his hand. So if you see that pop up, or I can also help monitor that for you. We do ask that you protect individual privacy. We do talk about sensitive topics or families and clients that we're working with. So please, if you have questions about that, reach out to any of our hub members. They all have an asterisk in front of their name, and they'll be able to answer any of your questions. We've all been on Zoom for quite some time now, but in case you don't know how to rename your profile or raise your hand, here's a quick example of how to do that. If you have any questions, just reach out to me, send me a message in chat, and I will answer that. In order to get a credit of attendance, we do ask that you complete our survey. The survey gives us information that we take back to our funders to share the work that we've been doing. Throughout today's session, we will be dropping the survey link in, and we'll have an opportunity to complete that, as well as we send that out in a follow-up email. Canvas is where we store everything. So if you would like access to our Canvas page, please email us at autismecho@aggies.usu.edu, and we will get you access to our Canvas page. We always love case studies from you guys or colleagues that you're working with. So if you're interested in presenting a case, please reach out to us and we'll get you set up on the schedule for that. We do have social media where we put information about our sessions, resources that are shared with us. So if you want to take a minute and follow us, that would be great. I'm going to stop sharing and turn the time over to Dr. Tom Higbee, who's going to be our expert presenter today.
Awesome. Thanks, Janelle, for the kind introduction, as well as the invite to come and chat with you guys today. Give me just 1 second to get my screen shared and then to get the rest of my setup set up, so to speak. Are you guys seeing my slides?
Yep, it looks great.
Fantastic. I'm an old school boomer professor, and so I have to use slides to keep myself on track. I know that's not a popular thing to do these days, but I will not read the slides to you. And thanks to those of you who have chosen to share your cameras with me, it's helpful to me as a presenter to be able to see a few faces to make sure that people are paying attention. Don't feel compelled to. I'm just saying that I really appreciate it. And it's a great opportunity for me to be here with you today to talk a little bit about what I do in the behavior analytic perspective on autism treatment and support. So again, thanks, Janelle, for this opportunity. Um, so yeah, my name is Tom Higbee. I've been a professor here at Utah State since 2002. I'm founder and the executive director of the ASSERT Autism Program, which is an early intervention program for preschoolers ages 3 to 6 who've been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorders here on the USU campus. And we've been operating for about 22 years now. And I've been working in the field of autism for almost 30 years now, which means I'm old. I would never call myself an autism expert because I do not have autism. And the only experts are people who have that direct lived experience. I've had the privilege of working with a lot of families and a lot of children and adults who fall on the autism spectrum. So you guys are all specialists and you are parents or people who have intimate knowledge of autism spectrum disorder. And so I cut out all my traditional what it is slides and just compressed it down into this one single summary slide of what we know about autism. We know it's a developmental disability caused by brain differences. Um, we know it has likely genetic components to it, although the link is not super clear. We know that it affects the way individuals on the spectrum communicate and engage with the social world. We know it's a spectrum disorder, and by that we mean that it affects people in lots of different ways. Back in the day, we used to express that spectrum as kind of a continuum, like a linear spectrum. And that's no longer true either. We know now that it's more like a color spectrum, or how it affects different people in lots of different ways, and not from I got a lot of autism to I've only got a little autism. It's not that binary. It really affects people in lots of different ways. And given all of the changes to the diagnostic criteria that have happened over the years, our autism tent has gotten every time broader, and so broad now that it encompasses people who are working at IBM, and it encompasses people who have no means of functional communication. All fall under the same kind of diagnostic category, which if we had more time, we could talk about how problematic that is, but we're not going to today. We're going to focus on strategies of support. But we know that these are the three areas that are affected by autism. Certainly communication is a big one. And that runs the gamut too, from individuals who, who don't use vocal speech or who might not even have any form of functional communication, all the way up to individuals who are communicating using vocal speech in the same way that you and I do. But even with them, their communication might be a little bit different. We know that it affects social and emotional functioning. Um, by that, many learners on the autism spectrum have a more challenging time than neurotypical folks do at understanding the complexities of our social world, um, which can cause challenges in terms of forming relationships and maintaining those relationships when they see the world through different eyes. Um, And then many individuals on the spectrum also have restricted patterns of interest. They can be hyper-focused on certain things and not attending to others. Some of them will have significant behavioral challenges. And I represent these three kind of general areas in this kind of triangular format for a reason because they're all interconnected. Um, it's very hard to effectively navigate our complex and ever increasingly complex social world if you don't have good language communication skills. But by the same token, even if I've got a strong vocabulary, if I don't understand the way social behavior works, it's also really challenging for me to navigate in our social society because so much of what we communicate to one another is not just through the words that we use, it's through expression, it's through nonverbal indicators, it's through things like sarcasm, innuendo, things that for many of our friends on the spectrum can be sometimes challenging to understand and interpret. And then those behavioral challenges, if I don't have a means of functionally controlling my environment through language or some alternative form of communication, um, it's not surprising that behavioral problems would emerge. Uh, Imagine for a moment, a quick thought experiment here. Imagine all of us have it, that one thing that we find to be supremely irritating, that one source of stimulation that's just like nails on a chalkboard. It makes you clench your fists and grit your teeth and want to do whatever you can to escape. Now imagine you had no means of communicating that you were irritated by that thing. Would you figure out a way to make that thing go away or to get away from that source of irritation? Absolutely, you would. Every one of us would. Okay? And that happens sometimes in some learners on the spectrum because of communication challenges. They develop other ways of controlling their environment that can sometimes involve physical violence, um, flopping to the floor, engaging in colloquially called meltdown behavior, and things like that. It's an adaptive skill. Without communication, they need other ways to let people know that they're distressed or unhappy. And sometimes that challenging behavior becomes a functional form of communication. All these things are related, and all these things, to varying degrees, make up what constitutes autism spectrum disorder. And I'm going to say something a little bit controversial right now. So I'm a little hesitant to say it because I know that we're recording, but I think it's well understood and by most folks. Autism spectrum disorder is nothing more or less than a label. It's a word that we made up to describe certain patterns of learning and behavior. It's not a thing in the same sense that Down syndrome is a thing that has a clear genetic marker, a clear cause. Rather, it's a label that we have added on after the fact to describe these particular patterns of interfacing with our social world. And as we broaden and broaden that label, to be perfectly honest, the label becomes less and less useful to us. But again, that's an argument for another day. Important thing is these are the things that are kind of affected in individuals on the autism spectrum. And we know that no two people on the autism spectrum are alike. There's the saying, if you've met someone on the autism spectrum, well, one person on the autism spectrum. I've worked with identical twins that were genetically the same, raised in the same household, and their autism was different, different flavors and varieties, which is fascinating. And I kind of said all this stuff too. Basically, we watch, we talk to parents, we compare to neurotypical norms, and if someone meets a threshold, they get a diagnosis. I'm obviously oversimplifying for the diagnostic folks in the audience. You guys do fantastic work. We've got great instruments now, much better than when I first entered the field in the mid 90s. Um, but it's totally dependent on observation and interview, comparison to neurotypical norms, what constitutes autism spectrum disorder. And these days, many people that are talking about it on the internet, especially, have actually self-diagnosed using information that they have found online. It's a fuzzy thing, which is not comfortable and not easy. Because we like to have, especially in our Western culture, we like to have a reason, a clear-cut reason, and a clear-cut cause, and it's uncomfortable to not know that. It's really hard on parents to not know that, but it's just the uncomfortable reality with autism. We don't have any blood tests, no genetic tests that can rule it in or rule it out definitively. We know it's a neurological disorder because it has to do with the way the brain works. There is some evidence for its heritability. You can trace it through families, but it's not like a one-to-one connection. I've known families that had 3 kids that all fell on the spectrum. I've worked with families that had 18 kids and only number 17 fell on the spectrum. So it's not that kind of direct connection. That's not what I'm here to talk about though, because that stuff's not my area. My area is really on this side of what do we do? What do we do to help families and help individuals on the spectrum? And there's also, I want to just put out there, there's an argument that's being made. It's like, well, you shouldn't be doing anything to help them. Autism is part of the natural variety of neurodiversity, and we've got no right to be um, attempting to change these kids. Uh, and what I want to say publicly is that's not what I'm about. I'm not about changing people. There's nothing wrong with being autistic, and I understand that argument. I would last thing I want to do is to have somebody fake it, in society. Although all of us do that, all of us learn the social norms of environments that we're in and learn how to kind of conform to those norms if we want to be in that environment. So language I like to use is about support. My goal is for every kid that walks through the door of our program is to help them be the best version of themselves they can be, help them acquire the skills that they will need in order to make the same kinds of life choices that I've had the privilege of making. Decide what I want to do for a career, be able to live on my own, be able to build relationships, have a wife, have a family, those kind of things. Choose my leisure activities. So my goal with intervention is not to change the person. My goal is to equip that person with the skills to make their own life choices so that they can live whatever life they like. And if that life involves lots of people and relationships, fantastic. And if that life doesn't involve those kind of things, I want to still equip them with the skills that they're going to need to hold down a job, to live on their own in an apartment, and to be able to interface with the folks at the video game store to buy new video games if that's their primary leisure activity. And that's their choice, and I would 100% respect that. What I would not want to do, though, is to just say dogmatically, I'm not going to help you build skills you don't have because I don't think it's right to do that. That's not true for any child. If we gave all of our kids choices, most 3-year-olds would choose to be on a tablet all day um, instead of going to preschool and learning. And so yes, every person has a right to self-determination. I affirm that. I agree with that. Again, there's nothing wrong with being autistic. It's a perfectly legitimate way to be. Um, my only goal and the goal of behavior analysis, the science that I'm going to talk with you guys about today, is to help equip people with the skills that they need to effectively navigate our social world in whatever way they deem that they want to. Um, and we learned a lot about autism and about these support strategies. And I also want to say that the support strategies that we use have also evolved significantly over time. Like I said, I've been in the field for almost 3 decades now, and how we approach kids and the strategies we use are different. They have morphed and evolved in positive ways from the original ways that I was taught to do the intervention that we do. Because applied behavior analysis is a science that's ever evolving. And as we've learned about better, more effective ways to do things, we've left behind things that weren't necessary and added in new ways of doing things that work out better for the kids. And that will always be the case. I would hope if I was giving this lecture to you 30 years from now, I'd be talking to you about different things because it would have had 30 additional years of learning and knowledge about effective strategies to support learners on the autism spectrum. Interestingly, this intervention hasn't been going on for very long in terms of science time. The very first behavioral interventions were really administered kind of in the 80s of the 20th century, which was within my lifetime. You know, Before that, really, people on the spectrum were pretty much written off for the most part. That was back in a time when we were blaming the parents for their autism too, which is a terrible, dark time. And we were telling parents that this kid can't learn. You know what? Keep them at home until they get to be too big to manage. Then we'll turn them over to the state. They'll live in a state institution. Um, Terrible, dark times. If you ever want to get depressed, look about the history of how we treated people with disabilities up until the last 40 years or so. Um, and why they were saying that was because a lot of these kids didn't do super well in just traditional educational environments. If we threw them in a class with 30 other peers where they had to sit for long periods of time, attend to multi-step directions, look to their peers and imitate what they were doing to know what to do, guess what? Many early learners in the autism spectrum didn't do super well in those kinds of environments. But thankfully, researchers show that it's not that they can't learn, it's just that they learn in a different way. And we need to construct the learning environment in a different way to take advantage of the strengths that they have and to accommodate some of the challenges that they have in learning in that kind of largely social way. And we now know that learners on the spectrum, of course, can learn. Um, we have to customize their learning to their specific needs. Um, all kids can make progress, and some kids can make even fairly dramatic progress. Um, and the interventions that have been shown to be most effective are those that are based upon the science of learning or applied behavior analysis, which I'll explain to you in a minute. And those interventions have largely shown that the earlier we start working with the kids, the better the ultimate outcome. And most of these interventions are fairly intensive. Things that we would never do with neurotypical 3 to 5 year olds. No neurotypical 3 to 5 year old needs 20 hours a week of individualized instruction to acquire language and acquire the things that they need to learn, because they're exploring, they're imitating, they're engaging in natural interactions with their environment that keeps their language building and their language going. Many learners on the autism spectrum aren't doing that. We don't exactly know why their developmental train gets uncoupled. They don't naturally imitate. They don't naturally explore. They tend to engage in a lot of repetitive behavior, self-stimulatory behavior that doesn't keep their development going. Um, and I don't mean to say that these interventions don't work with older individuals and older learners. They absolutely do. And we still use them, adapted for the age range. I simply mean to say that I'm not aware of a circumstance where you've had a 10-year-old child who hasn't developed any language, and then all of a sudden you step in and give them 2 years of intensive intervention, and then by age 12 they're going to general education, middle school. That's just not typically the way that it works. In terms of the research that we have, the oldest kids they've started with that have shown kind of dramatic outcomes have been about age 7 or 8. Um, Not the kids don't make progress, but the kids that make those kind of giant developmental leaps have all been with kids that we start fairly young. And that makes sense. If kids aren't meeting developmental milestones, are kind of stuck developmentally, what happens is the gap between the skills they have and the skills they need in terms of their neurotypical peers, it just gets larger and larger every year as typical development marches on. And there just gets to be a point where the gap is so big that we just don't have enough time to directly teach all those skills. So early intervention, like for all kinds of disabilities, the earlier we can identify and provide supports, um, the better it's the long-term outcome. I like to put up this graphic just to kind of illustrate the difference in perspective from kind of the behavior analytic or the science-based perspective on autism to kind of the commonplace, or what we refer to as the kind of traditional medical model or view of disability. And that is, we view the disability as some underlying biological condition that's causal, and we think of all these behavior patterns as symptoms of that underlying physiological condition. And if that's the focus, then of course the focus of the treatment or the intervention should be on fixing that underlying condition, with the hope then that those behavioral symptoms would go away. And that works for things like a strep throat infection, right? If you get a strep throat infection, you feel crappy, you're achy, your throat hurts, you have all these symptoms. And you can treat the symptoms, but that stuff's not going away until you treat the infection. And once you treat the infection, the symptoms start to get better. But when we try and apply that same logic to autism, it just doesn't work. Because how do we know the child has autism? Well, because they have difficulty with language, difficulty with social behavior. They have these competing challenging behaviors and these restricted patterns of interest. Okay, well, great. Now, why does the kid do all those things? Well, because they have autism. Well, how do you know he has autism? Because they do all those things. And he gets in this circular logical argument that doesn't take us anyplace besides just spinning around in circles. We don't know what the autism is. We think it resides in the brain, but we can't pinpoint a single location, and there's certainly not a biomedical treatment for it. What we have are these challenges we talked about. So what we do from a behavior analytics standpoint is, instead of thinking and focusing about the autism per se, we're really focused upon those skill deficits, or those things that are interfering with this person's ability to live their best life. And we keep our intervention and our support strategies at that level. And so we don't directly intervene on the autism, we intervene on the communication challenges, and we want to build communication skills. We intervene on the social challenges, want to teach kids the way the social world works and help them acquire the play skills and social skills that they'll need to be successful. The kids that have really restricted patterns of interest, we don't try and get rid of those. We just try and teach them other fun things to do, other fun things to talk about. so that there can be a range. Teach them that not everybody likes trains for sure, but not everybody wants to talk about only trains. Um, and if you want to build relationships, you got to have a wider variety of conversation topics. We keep it at the level of behavior because, to be honest, that's what we have for right now. Maybe there will come a time when our imaging technology advances to the point where we can identify where the autism is, and I don't know. I can't even imagine what that would look like fixing it. And to be honest, there's not a single autism. There are autisms. Like I said, there are probably multiple biological reasons why kids behave in these patterns that we've assigned this label of autism to. So I don't think this is happening anytime soon, where we're going to find some magic bullet cause or magic bullet miracle cure for autism. And really, they don't need a cure because it's not a disease that needs to be cured. It's a variation for sure, and what they need is support. They need ways they can acquire the skills that they'll need to be successful. One person's perspective. So I've been going on and on about this science of behavior analysis, or as it's known colloquially in the autism world, it's just by its initials, ABA. And the initial is ABA, which stands for Applied Behavior Analysis. Of ABA in and of itself has become a noun, and it refers to, in many cases, people equate it with a very specific style of intervention. And I'll try and help you understand what that is, and also understand that real modern applied behavior analysis applied to autism is much broader than the things that we were doing back in the 1980s. We've learned a lot, though, over the years that the environmental events that surround behavior have a dramatic impact on how likely behavior is to be repeated. In general, people behave in ways that improve their situation, you know? So were this live and in person, and I could hear you, I would tell some funny joke right now, at least some subset of you would laugh, and I would use that as an example to illustrate that I'm going to tell that joke again because I generally like social attention, why I chose the career that I did, put myself in front of people and teach. And so when I engage in social behavior and I get that feedback from an audience, I find that to be very rewarding. That's powerful to me, and so I will engage in more of that. Versus now imagine I tell another joke. I'm not going to do it, especially since we're recording, Janelle. Imagine I tell a little joke that's a little edgier, that's really close to the line of appropriate versus inappropriate in a context with strangers. And everybody, instead of laughing, everybody's heads kind of go down. They're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he just said that. Um, I'm not going to lie to you. I'd probably try it one more time just to make sure. But if it bombed two times and I got that negative reaction and started getting emails from my dean, I wouldn't tell that joke a third time. I would learn from that experience that that behavior did not produce a positive outcome for me. And my ability to learn that way from the consequences of my actions is what's behind the science of behavior analysis. So behavior analysis is the name of this science that kind of understands human behavior in terms of its environmental context and determinants. And then applied behavior analysis is the branch of that field that takes this knowledge of human learning and the way humans learn and applies it in an effort to improve the human condition, to help people who need help. Now, of course, I'm a behavior analyst for many reasons, but this is the primary one. This is the core philosophy of the science of behavior analysis. And it seems simple. That's why it's kind of dismissed sometimes. Our core philosophy is this, that all behavior happens for a reason. And that reason is because it's being reinforced by the natural environment, meaning it's producing positive outcomes. It's allowing the person to get things they want and escape or avoid things that they don't want. So all behavior happens for a reason. Okay? Now, don't get me wrong, you're all magical, you're all special, you're all unique. Just because we can understand your behavior scientifically doesn't mean that doesn't take that away from you. But I don't know if you noticed what I did just now, but I did a little philosophical trick here. What I did is I took the causes of behavior and I ripped them out of the person and I put them largely in the environment. And that's important because as I just told you, I can't change the person directly. I told you I don't even know where the autism is. We think it's in the brain, but I certainly have no means of affecting it directly. But if really the causes of human behavior, both for neurotypicals and neurodiverse folks, are largely in the environment. Now, hey, the environment's changeable. I can change the consequences that those behaviors produce. Um, Most of them, not all of them, but most of them. And if the consequences can change, that means that the behavior can change, uh, which I think is amazing. It's an absolutely incredibly optimistic way of looking at the world because it means that all behavior can change. Even behavior that appears to be intractable or very challenging or very difficult, or that a student or a person's been using for a very long time to get their wants and needs met, even your behavior is potentially changeable if we change the consequences in the right way. And I think that's awesome because it's an optimistic way of looking at the world. Because it means there's no such thing as a student who's unteachable. There's no such thing as someone whose behavior can be changed. Everybody can learn and can overcome behavioral challenges, even if they have high support needs. I did not say that it would be easy or that it would be fast. I said it's possible. And I also don't mean to say that autism doesn't affect the way these kids learn and interface with the world. It 100% does. 100% does. But I also say that that doesn't mean that those behaviors, even though they're influenced by the autism and the way that that causes individuals to see the world, that it doesn't mean that those behaviors can't also change. They certainly can. Okay? Now, this brings up the argument again of should we be changing these behaviors, right? Do we have a right to changing these behaviors? Or are we fundamentally changing the person? And that's a discussion that you have to have with every one of your clients, every one of your students and their families. And if you're working with adults, with them. I'm not going to change anybody's behavior that's a adult that can give me their consent against their will. And I'm not trying to change the person. I'm trying to help them acquire behaviors that are going to let them meet their life goals. Um, but I think it's awesome. All behavior can change, not easily, not necessarily quickly, but all behavior can change. And I've had the privilege of working with learners who came in with lots of significant skill deficits and lots of behaviors that interfered. And through the power of positive reinforcement and science-based teaching, we were able to help them acquire significant language skills and social skills that allowed them to be in much less restrictive educational placements than they were destined for initially. And it's let them do things with their lives that I had an opportunity to do, like play sports, like have girlfriends, like make life choices about my future career and things like that, which I view as a positive outcome. And I've also had learners who came in with no functional communication and were engaging in a lot of pretty significant challenging behavior towards themselves and others, and had the opportunity to teach them some functional communication skills that allowed them to have control over their world so they didn't have to hit themselves in the face anymore, or didn't have to hit other people, didn't have to throw themselves to the ground in Walmart and scream anymore, but could get their basic wants and needs met and have a significantly higher quality of life, both for them and for their caregivers, um, because they acquired those communication skills that allowed them to effectively control stimulation around them. So there are these two equal and opposite processes that influence behavior. I'm going to focus on one of those because it's the most important one. Um, and that's the way behavior is strengthened or made more likely to occur. And that occurs through the process of reinforcement. So when someone's behavior improves their situation, they're going to do it again. They're more likely to repeat it. That's reinforcement. Okay. When somebody's behavior makes their situation worse, they're less likely to do that again. And that process is called punishment. Um, and again, I'm not going to talk a ton about punishment because it's not a tool that we use a lot. It's important to understand because sometimes we think we're providing reinforcement, but the kid's behavior actually goes down. So what we've functionally done, even if we were given gummy bears, if that kid's behavior decreases, that's punishment because punishment is defined by its effects. We focus on the reinforcement side, and there are two different kinds of reinforcement, positive and negative reinforcement. And when you say positive and negative, I don't want you to think like positive, happy, and negative, sad. I want you to think positive in the mathematical sense of something being added versus negative in the mathematical sense of something being subtracted. So with positive reinforcement, we identify things that the kid finds motivating, And when they engage in behaviors that are the things that we want them to do, that are in their best interest, we provide that positive reinforcement to strengthen that behavior and make it more likely to occur in the future. And negative reinforcement is also strengthens behavior, but instead of strengthening behavior by adding something that the learner finds positive, what we're doing is removing something the learner finds unpleasant. It's the reason why you click your seatbelts to shut the stupid buzzer off, or you answer a ringing telephone. Annoying stuff's happening, you act, and the annoying stuff stops happening. Escape or avoidance is negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is the tool that we use to help the kids learn adaptive skills. Negative reinforcement is the tool that the kids use on us to get us to stop doing things that they don't want to do. And I will tell you, I spend years teaching people, professionals, how to do the kind of things that every single kid knows how to do very, very well. The kids have been using the principles of behavior. They wouldn't call them that, but they've been using the principles of behavior to control all the adults in their lives since they were very, very small. And we fight our biology because we are conditioned as adult humans to not like kids to be upset. It's what keeps our species from abandoning those babies when they're born because, man, they take a lot of work. Um, it's very aversive or unpleasant to have kids be upset, and we'll do a lot of things to keep them from being upset. And that's great because that helps us keep them alive. If the kids don't develop good communication skills, that can end up working against them because the kids will continue to use that to I want to say the word manipulate, but that has a negative connotation to it, to control adults and get people to do what they want. And I have witnessed entire family systems that were dancing around a 3-year-old kid. And this 3-year-old kid is just jerking the chain, and everybody's just dancing to try and keep this kid happy. And I'm like, that's an awful lot of power to give to a 3-year-old kid. But the kid has all the power. If we had more time, maybe we'll come back some other time and talk specifically about strategies for addressing kind of challenging behavior. But yeah, what we're about is figuring out those connections and teaching the kids better ways to get their wants and needs met. But positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement are the two processes that strengthen behavior. We love positive reinforcement for many, many reasons. One, because it's highly effective. When we identify things that the kids find motivating and we arrange opportunities for the kids to get access to those things that are motivating when they do the things that are in their long-term best interest, it works. Behavior changes. So how that works in ABA-based intervention is we create multiple opportunities for the kids to practice these adaptive skills and then get immediate access to positive reinforcement, making those behaviors more likely to occur in the future. Now you might say to yourself, wait, Tom, we do not live in a world where M&Ms fall out of the sky every time somebody does a good thing. And I get that, 100% true. Most of our lives as adults are governed by punishment and avoiding punishment. Now we'll expose our kiddos to that cold, cruel world eventually too. But we have kids that are not naturally motivated by the same kind of things that neurotypical kids are. And us just wanting them to be has absolutely no impact on that. And so what we do is and the things that we're asking the kids to do as part of their intervention programs, they're not easy things. They're challenging things. Learning's not always easy. And to expect they would just do it for free is not realistic. That being said, we know that we're not going to be, our goal is not to follow the kids around their whole life, patting them on the head when they do good things. We use positive reinforcement to jumpstart learning and to get the kids to the point where they can get those natural consequences, those natural positive reinforcers that occur when you engage with people, when you play, when you get answers to questions and things like that. Any artificial reinforcers that we use are just that. They're tools that we're going to add in temporarily to get the kids to engage with us, to convince them to do these hard things. And then as soon as they don't need them anymore, we're going to swap them out for more functional consequences that'll have a better chance of keeping the behavior going for the long term. So why I love positive reinforcement so much? Number one, it works. It's highly effective. That's the kind of thing you have to go to, 8 years of college to learn that people like getting access to what they want. 8 years of college, I can tell you guys that. I just gave it to you. Save some college time. People like learning that way. I bet if you think back to your own educational experience, the teachers that you liked best were the ones that gave you the most feedback, where you always knew where you stood, versus the ones that you only heard from when you were naughty or did something wrong. Okay. It's fun to learn when people are using positive reinforcement. It encourages students to keep trying and keep doing hard things. Um, and guess what is also cool? If you use lots of positive reinforcement, you yourself come to take on some of those same properties of those rewards that you're using. You become a positive reinforcer, and the kids want to work with you. And we rely on that in our early intervention programs because we're asking kids to do hard things. And if they don't want to do it, guess what? They're not going to. They hold all the power. They can throw themselves to the floor and say, forget it, I'm not going to do it. Um, and that's it, game over, right? We're not going to force them to do it. That doesn't teach anything other than that the bigger, stronger person makes the smaller, weaker person do what they want. And that's a really bad thing to teach because eventually every single one of these kids is going to be that stronger, bigger person. And guess what they're going to do if that's what we've done to them? Same thing. They're going to use violence to try and control people, which is not a good long-term strategy. All about positive reinforcement, all about creating a positive learning environment and encouraging the kids to continue engaging with us because that's the only way they're going to do it. Most of us don't just go out and seek out hard things to do um, when there's no positive reinforcement for doing them. The tricky part, though, is that reinforcers are individually determined, meaning the things that motivate me might be different than the things that motivate you, certainly might be different than motivate a 3-year-old on the autism spectrum or a 12-year-old on the autism spectrum. All that has to be identified on an individual basis. We have to find out, what are you into? And not like forever, but like today, because those preferences change. And it's only a reinforcer if it works, if it changes behavior. And so we have detailed assessments that we do. In our preschool, we run them at least twice. Our kids are there 4 hours a day, so at least every 2 hours, we're identifying new motivation, new reinforcers to use. Um, because that thing that was motivating at 8 o'clock when you first started, by 10 o'clock might not be motivating anymore. Um, and as soon as performance drops off, we want to identify new things to keep the kids engaged and working. Now, this science that I've been talking to you about has been so effective at supporting learners on the autism spectrum that it's become almost synonymous with a treatment for autism, when in fact that's not true. Applied behavior analysis is a very broad science with applicability to lots of different human conditions. It can be used in individuals, it can be used in groups, it can be used to help lots of different kinds of things. And there's also been a lot of kind of branding. People want to talk about a certain brand of applied behavior analysis and give it different names because there's a market. Applied behavior analysis is the science that underlies a lot of treatments, a lot of support strategies. Um, it doesn't belong to any one person. It wasn't invented by any one person. There are lots of really good practitioners that are doing it. If they're doing it right, they're individualizing the supports to the needs of their individual students and learners. There's a lot of evidence for its effectiveness. Again, I haven't updated the numbers. There have been hundreds of studies, including RCT type studies. Um, Lots of federal agencies for many years have identified it as an effective strategy. This is coming under attack now. And again, if we had more time, I could go into for the reasons behind that. But it's still the best thing we've got. And as a science-based approach that's ever evolving, it's getting better all the time. That doesn't mean that every single person who practices is perfect. I would never make that claim. Just like every teacher is not the best teacher, every psychologist is not the best psychologist. There's certainly going to be some variability in the way that it's applied. In the time that I have left, which appears to be about 6 minutes, I will tell you what a modern state-of-the-art ABA program looks like. By the way, if any of you guys ever want to come visit, we're here in Logan, Utah. You have an open invitation to come and hang out with us. I would love to show you around. You can spend the morning with us and watch what this looks like on the ASSERT campus. I'd pair you up with some of my instructors and you could sit down and see what this looks like. You're welcome. Just send me an email. I'm sure Janelle can circulate my email and we could set that up. Everything about what we do with the kids is based on them. We use detailed curriculum-based assessments to create an individualized instructional program for every learner that's designed to meet their specific needs, take advantage of their strengths, try and remediate the areas where they're weak. And it has to be comprehensive too. all those features of the autism triangle. So it's not just a language curriculum. It's tackling language, social skills, pre-academics, self-care skills, how to learn in groups, how to learn in the community. It's got to be comprehensive. We break complex skills down into their component parts, and we build more complex and use simple skills to build into more complex ones. We provide students with multiple opportunities to practice their skills depending on how they learn. Some kids need a lot of practice and some kids learn more quickly. We use multiple research-based teaching techniques that include discrete trial teaching, which is what most people think about, which is kind of that knee-to-knee intensive teaching. We still do that because there's a place for that. It's a great way to teach basic facts and skills. It's an absolutely terrible way to teach social behavior. It's a great way to teach kids how to answer questions. It's terrible for teaching kids how to ask questions. And so just doing discrete trial teaching would be an incomplete program. We need to do other strategies too. We use things like naturalistic instruction. We have a great set of tools called photographic activity schedules that are a system of visual supports that are designed to help kids learn to be more independent, learn how to navigate tasks on their own without adult support. We don't want to be following these kids around telling them what to do all the time. There's a wide range of evidence-based teaching strategies that we pull out depending on what the needs of the student are. Like I said, we use a lot of positive reinforcement to encourage the kids to engage with us. Over time, we change what that looks like. As soon as the kids get keyed into the social world, the reinforcers also switch away from treats to social reinforcers and play materials. We teach kids how to tolerate delays over time too, just like you guys have to delay consequences and reinforcement. The goal is making the learning process fun because, like I said, if it's not fun and enjoyable, the kids aren't going to do it. And if they don't want to do it, then I said game over. We make all of our decisions about how to move forward based on data that we collect. We track every single student response and make modifications. Our philosophy is if the learner's not learning, it's because we're not teaching them properly. They tell us through their behavior. If they're making progress, then we're on the right track. If they're not making progress, we need to make modifications to the way we teach. We address challenging behavior through a process called functional assessment, identifying what those consequences are that those needs that are being met through the challenging behavior, figure out ways to teach kids better ways to get what they need. We don't have downtime. We're using every moment as a teaching moment. We take steps to promote what we call generalization and maintenance, meaning using the skills outside of the instructional context. Um, we teach parents how to support skills in the home. We do not teach parents to be interveners. That's not their job. Their job is to be a parent, and we want them to be really high quality parents. We want them to support learning that's happening in school, but many of our parents are under a significant amount of stress already. I wouldn't want to heap more on that by asking them to do the kind of things that we're trying to do. We're trained professionals who have chosen this as our profession. They didn't choose this. They're doing their best to navigate a challenging situation. We want to help them and support them. Different parents have different levels of interest and different amounts of bandwidth to dedicate to this sort of thing. And so we adjust that parent support also based upon parent interest and parent need. And the program is always directed by someone with advanced graduate training. And behavior analysis is a licensed profession in the state of Utah and in about 40 of the 50 states here in the US. And so only people who have gone through the requisite training should be doing this sort of thing. The goal is not only to teach the kid, have the kid learning be fun, but also to teach the kids how to learn in other ways, learn like the other kids do through observation, small group instruction. And then we gradually transition our teaching to make it look like what they're going to see in kindergarten, what's going to be more common in general education. We teach play skills and we create safe opportunities to practice those skills. And then we transition the kids appropriately. So that's the quick and dirty summary in 50 minutes. I did it in 49, leaving 1 minute for any questions that might have come up. Hopefully, to just give you a flavor of what the applied behavior analysis approach looks like. Take-home message would be, it should be 100% individualized. It should be based on positive reinforcement, with the goal of helping the learner be the best version of themselves, whatever that version ends up being. Thank you.
I could find my unmute button. I thank you so much, Tom. That was a great presentation. And if any of you are up in Logan, Utah, I would highly encourage you to come and do the ASSERT program. Our Part C program, the kids that I work with, transition. A lot of them sometimes transition into the ASSERT program, and it's just an outstanding program with that. So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. Good to see everyone. Bye.
Okay, I am now going to ask our case presenter to talk so I can find Kristen. Where are you? Say your name so I can find you on my screen.
Sorry, I had to unmute.
Okay, there you are. I'm like, I can't find you. Okay, so if any one of you were on our call last month, Kristen is one of the families that presented, and she really is wanting our ideas and feedback from her little kid. So she's going to briefly talk to us about her little kid, and she has four questions that she's posing to all of us. So.
Okay, so I did email this and my husband and I did it together, so I'll try to stick to that so I don't go off on tangents. But my son Benjamin is 7 years old. He goes to ABA 4 days a week. That presentation was excellent. I really got a lot out of it, so I'm so glad I was able to be on this today. He was diagnosed with autism at age 3, and at that time it was level 1. But really when he's 3, the metric's different. So at this point, the way he's functioning, he is more of severe, possibly profound autism. I don't know what the official term is. He's still fully nonverbal. He attends a SPED class that's contained with moderate to severe disabled classmates, and really cute bunch of kiddos and an awesome teacher. He does have some gains through ABA, and he has been in ABA not full-time, but like regularly since he was diagnosed at age 3. But it actually, I mean, it's minimal compared to many, but there's a lot of nuances I could get into of it being good. A big part of our story is that he went through an 8-month period of severe self-harm in 2023. We had to take him to primary children's ER to try to get some help. We were really desperate for help. This year, thankfully, that was able to get regulated in 2023 with some medication changes. And also, I believe his nervous system was able to calm down. And so that has not, thankfully, been an issue since the end of 2023. This year, though, Ben started just this year, since January, Ben started hitting others. And that was, of course, very distressing for sending him to school. His little sister was one of his targets. She's 5 right now. At the time, she was 4. That was very distressing, and we were getting help at ABA, but it was hard to know what to do with that. And overall, that has stopped after about 3.5 months. But kind of like with the self-harm, it's not clear why exactly it started and why exactly it ended. One big part of Ben's story is digestive health, and that's the center of my first question. I know it's a mixed group of people here, so whoever has some ideas, I'm going to just throw this out here. So I wrote this with my husband. We're interested in feedback on autism gut, is what we call it. So basically, our much of Ben's sensory overload is connected to digestive issues, constipation, and pain from what is like paralyzed bowels. The more that we do sometimes that's traditional, use Miralax, use laxatives, do suppositories, do this, that, and the other, ends up having, seems to contribute to it being worse. And so we've tried to weed through the thousands of voices online of ideas of what we should do. The question is, what is a professional current expert on this subject that has an answer other than Miralax? Also, why aren't caregivers told at the time of diagnosis how prevalent digestion issues are and the dangers they pose in a very high percentage of people with autism, even to the point of causing, ruptured bowel and sepsis and death. So that's my first question.
So I have just dropped the case discussion and questions into the chat. We're going to go into breakout groups. And Kristen will kind of bump you in between breakout groups so that everybody can ask you questions, follow-up questions. I know we always want to ask more, but sometimes when I leave it in this large group, we just end up asking you tons and tons of questions and never get to recommendations. So we're going to go into getting you some recommendations, but like I said, we'll bump you in between those breakout sessions. So the first one is Joe, and Joe, I'll be joining your group to take notes, but you're taking the autism gut. And then Colin and Stacy, you're taking the question number 2, which is the nonverbal limbo. And then Lindsay and Cassidy, you have question number 3. And like I said, for everybody, I've put that in a PDF, so you all have access to her synopsis and then her questions. So if all of the note takers will send their notes to the Autism ECHO at usu.edu, we will compile all of the recommendations and send those out to Kristen. And as for everybody else, they are always stored on our Canvas page. So if you want to see what was shared, because we are just right at time, you can go back and review those. So maybe you have a client that is struggling with digestive issues. You can come back and get those recommendations. And there's Kristen. I just saw her, so I don't know if you heard. We will compile everybody's resources and recommendations for you and send you out an email with those. So again, thank you all for joining and being here with us today. Next month, we are having Justin Benson. He's a speech language pathologist. He's going to be talking to us about augmentative communication and ways to increase that. So hopefully you can all join us then. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.